We are going to have a look at the second game of the mini-match in round 5 of the World Cup between Magnus Carlsen and Vasyl Ivanchuk. And we have seen that in the first game of the match, Magnus Carlsen had an amazing victory with the white pieces. Now he's playing with black, and Vasyl Ivanchuk needs to bounce back in order to force a tiebreak. But if that's going to happen, we will see in this video. Before I'm going to show you, I would like to make mention of the fact that we are finally have now 1000 subscribers, and I'm really grateful to all of you who have subscribed to the channel, but it's just the beginning. So in order to grow more, I'm counting on your support, and then you will get to see much more exciting chess stuff in the upcoming weeks, months, hopefully years. Let's see. First, the game, Ivanchuk playing with the white pieces, starts with 1e4, and we have a very classical opening on the board, the Spanish opening, bishop b5, a6. And of course, both players have tremendous expertise in this field. Magnus played it for a long period of time, exclusively in times he wanted to play very solid with black. So we have the main line of the Rue Lopez with rook e1, b5, bishop b3, castling kingside. And well, if white plays the move c3, then the move d5 leads to the very well-known Marshall Gambit. That's a very reliable system, and it serves black very well from a theoretical perspective. A lot of people have played different systems since then. Instead of c3 another, a lot of pawn moves have been tried, but also the move a4. It's one of the more common continuations, intending to put pressure on the pawn on b5, and black is unable to recapture as the rook on a8 is unprotected. Therefore, rook b8 is one of the rare moves, but it's very clear that you say, okay, I leave my rook from the a file, I keep the pawn on b5 protected. After a b5, you do recapture with the pawn, and now white has an open file, but on the other hand, he is unable to enter in one way or another. And this very solid line for black was very popular in the World Championship match Magnus Carlsen played in 2021 with Jan Nepomniachtchi. And Jan Nepomniachtchi was absolutely unable to crack this setup. He played exclusively the move h3. It has been played very often afterwards as well. But Ivanchuk goes for the move c3. It's one of the logical ideas. And after the move d6, white goes d4, occupying the center. You have to be careful, because one of the ideas of white's play is here to play the move d5. When the knight is trapped, the knight can't go to the a file as the rook covers d square. So the main move is e takes d4. White recaptures with the c pawn, and this pawn center looks very nice for white. Sorry, pardon me. And in order to generate some counterplay, you have to strike back in the center with the move d5, challenging the pawn on e4. White goes e5. And black goes knight e4. Typical idea, the pawn on d5 supports the knight. White goes knight c3, so intending to put pressure on the pawn on d5 or even take on e4. So knight takes c3, b takes c3. If we look at the position, it seems as if white is even a little bit better in these structures, thanks to this nice pawn chain, more space. Pieces have more potential. The big question is what black is going to do with his bishop. And when I looked at this position, I was thinking bishop g4 is very logical. But then white's going to play the move queen d3, intending queen c2, bishop c2, pardon me, and then you're threatening checkmate. And we have seen already in a lot of videos that this battery of queen and bishop will provoke new weaknesses against the black king, including that game yesterday played by Magnus Carlsen in their first game. Magnus knows the potential problems, instead places the bishop on f5. I like this move because now you're depriving the white pieces from coming to that diagonal. White played h3, queen d7, and bishop e3 on the board. And okay, white's maybe a little bit better, but if black really wants, it can even consider playing rook a8 and try to regain control over the open file. Frankly, I think black is in good shape. Magnus had a different idea. He played here the move knight e8. If you look at this as a beginner, you think, why is the knight going back? Well, very simple. The knight is on its way to e6. But things are not that simple. Ivanchuk played very interesting move, knight e2. Looks strange to move that knight back, but the point is that now, if you go for the move knight e6, there is queen f3 with an attack against the bishop and the pawn. Things are hanging now, so that's not good. And well, you got to consider alternatives. And what I think one of the additional ideas of Black's play is to launch the C pawn, to get rid of the backward pawn, initiate exchanges to simplify the position. And after knight e6, the knight comes back into play, and very soon you're going to win back the pawn on c5 with reasonable play here. It didn't happen. Magnus had a different idea in mind. Play the move b4, challenging the base of the chain, ready to open up the b file for the rook, but white goes c4. So white says, okay, you can have that pawn on b4, but it's blockaded, and it will not get anywhere further. D takes c4, bishop takes c4. Could also have taken with a knight, but there's a clear idea of placing the bishop on c4. We will see it very soon. Black goes c6. And here, personally, I think it does make a lot of sense to activate your strongest pieces. And starting with rook a6 followed by queen a4 seems a bit nicer than what was played in the game. As in the game, queen a4 right away was played, but then with a rook on a1, there's not that much pressure against the pawn on c6. One of the ideas of queen a4 is that black doesn't have the time here to play knight e6. That would be the ideal move, but that would allow the move d5, and white is breaking through, attacking the knight, and the pawn on c6 cannot capture because the queen on d7 is hanging. So after queen a4, rook b7 was played to protect the queen. And well, the idea is to get a knight into the game to e6. White played knight f1, but I think it's not the right idea to reroute your knight in this case. We will see very soon what the main drawback is. The move I prefer is the move f4 to strengthen the center. And another idea is that if you play knight e6 in this case, there is this move g4. And all of a sudden, the bishop doesn't have any squares to go to. If it goes back to g6, there is the move f5 and the bishop is trapped. So that also shows that knight e6 is not possible because it covers the e6 square for the bishop. Better is to play the move bishop e6, trying to swap the bishops. But now we are not going for kingside attack as white, but we play the move rook e to c1, and we start pressurizing the pawn on c6, making it harder for the knight to leave the back rank. I think that was the way to go. Ivanchuk goes for knight f1, and after knight e6, knight g3, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to g6, rook ed1, because now the pawn on d4 had to be protected twice by bishop and rook. What is black going to do next? Well, improving the knight to e6 was part of a big plan, as the knight is on its way via c7 to d5. Queen b3, knight d5, and black is absolutely in control. I like black's position. There's a nice grip in the center. White is unable to bring its pawns any further. And okay, the queen is now blocking the pawn, but on the other hand, the queen is not a great blockader in general. So I think what white should do is try to challenge that knight on d5. With a move like knight e2, planning to go knight f4, and it's a battle. But in the game, Ivanchuk played the move rook a5, exerting pressure against the knight, but there is the move rook a7, so there's no time to take on d5 yet. Rook d to a1 was played, rook f to a8, and now this is very interesting because all the rooks are getting swapped in this position, and it was part of a big plan by Magnus, because he of course had seen that white could have taken a pawn on d5 by taking twice there, but it was not played in the game. If you would play here queen a3, there is really a lot of counterplay with the move b3 followed by b2, threatening to promote a b pawn, and black is winning. Now, with very precise play, I'm going to show you the main line. There's e6. If you go b3, there's a very interesting move, knight f5, looking for this counterplay against the bishop on e7. Bishop takes f5, e takes f7, check, king f8. Now you take on f5, b2, and after queen takes h7, you're threatening checkmate, you're covering the b1 square. If you take on f7, then there will be a lot of checks, and that's eventually leading to a draw. I'm pretty sure this was all calculated by at least Magnus, but probably also by Ivanchuk, because in the end, he decided not to play this move, and he went for the move knight e2. With the idea to get a knight back into play, probably prepare knight to f4. And here Magnus played queen a3. He wants to go for the exchange of queens. Very understandable, but maybe even more precise is to start with a check, and after king h2 only then play the move queen a3, because once pieces are getting swapped, You have a passed pawn as black and the king is just further away. I'm actually a bit surprised he didn't go for this move, but still, queen a3 is a good move. After the exchange of queens, you have a very annoying pawn, and with moves like bishop b1, preparing the advance of the a pawn as the bishop protects the a2 square, this looks totally winning. White can't take on a3, bishop c1 was played, and now after queen takes b3, bishop takes b3, I think black has absolutely zero. White has absolutely zero winning chances here. We will see what happens. Bishop d3, attacking the knight. Knight goes to f4. Knights are getting swapped, and Magnus is aiming for simplifications. He played the move c5, and now the exchange of pawns is inevitable because if the pawn moves, then c4 will be played, and two connected passed pawns are really too much for white. So white had to take. Bishop takes c5. Further exchanges are initiated. e6, king f8. I mean, other moves are possible as well. But after e takes f7, that pawn is not dangerous because it will just be taken on the next move. King f1, bishop f7. Bishops are getting swapped as well. Now the king has to come really fast to stop the b pawn. Bishop goes to d4. And I think this is also an interesting moment because bishop is really supporting the advance of the b pawn. And question is what white should do. My thought was that it makes a lot of sense to play here the move f3 first, so that the pawn on f2 can never be taken. If you play here b3, then the king can come to d3 and you're in time. You're not really threatening to take the bishop because then the pawn advances. But whenever you go for the move b2, there is king c2 and the king is in time. Now Ivanchuk, I don't know why, he played the move king d3, attacked the bishop right away. After bishop takes f2, the pawn is gone. After bishop d2, bishop c5, king c4. Now the move bishop f8 was played. And here, this is absolutely remarkable. Ivanchuk resigned. I mean, you may think why he can take the pawn. Well, there's a long sequence, and of course the king and pawn endgame needs to be evaluated properly. And for these guys, it's not too complicated, but for us, it's very interesting to see because it's very interesting educational content. After taking on b4, the black king is much faster, and it walks in this way so that the white king is not able to come to d4, and you're trying to approach the pawn. Let's see what is the main line. King d3, king f4, king e2, king g3, king f1. And now the key move here is to move king h2, so that the king can never come to g1. You go king f2, and now you try to put white in zugzwang with the move g5, so that white will eventually run out of useful moves. King f3, for instance, and now we play h5. This is very important. You can never really go g4 because of h4, and then you take the pawn on h3. King f2 only move, and now it's g4, which is the killer move. After hg4, the problem is that if you go king f1, there's a move g3. And the king got to give up the pawn on g2, you take on g2, and it's game over. The alternative is g3, but after king h3, you also got to give up the pawn. After king f1, king takes g3, you have the opposition. This is an essential position every chess player needs to know. After king h3, king h1, g3, you bring up the pawn, and it's game over. King f2, king h2, and the g-pawn queens in the end. So, of course, the pawn cannot be taken, and probably that's the reason why Ivanchuk thought, well, then if I cannot take the pawn, then it's just lost, because the king got to stay in the vicinity of that pawn, and in the meantime, that king is going to be activated and tries to attack the pawns on the other side of the board. Objectively speaking, though, if white plays a move like g4, and after king e6, you play the move king d4, so you try to stay in the middle to stay in touch with the b pawn. You're within the square, but at the same time, this king is not able to come to any of these squares colored in red, because the pawn covers these squares, the bishop covers the g5 square, and well, in case of a move like b3, this is actually quite funny. The move to make a draw here is bishop to c1 to cover the b2 square. If you thought that you could play here the move king to c3, well, then there is the move bishop to b4, and that is just game over. Because of a skewer, you cannot take the pawn on b3 because bishop on d2 will be taken, and yeah, otherwise you just lose the endgame for sure. So anyway, maybe it's just a nice gesture that you lose the match and you think, okay, he deserved to win anyway. Other people would think, okay, why to drop your rating for free that easily? That's also a decision, personal decision, and Ivanchuk did it in his way. What do you think? Would you have done the same? Would you have resigned? Maybe he just thought that it's lost. I'm not sure what went through his mind. But in any case, what we know for sure is that Magnus Carlsen is through to the quarter-finals. And there he's going to face the Indian super talent Gukesh, who is just making an incredible rise on the rating list. He's currently number 7 in the world. And who knows, maybe if someone is able to stop Magnus Carlsen, it's going to be Gukesh. But let's see, that's for later. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for all your support so far. And I'm counting on more support. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.